The Tube Kids by Edwina Longbottom. Chapter 1. The Move to Tavistock Square. The sound of cardboard boxes scraping across the wooden floor echoed through the small flat. Ellie looked around the cramped living room, her hands on her hips. The apartment was nothing like the suburban home they had left behind, a stark reminder of how much their lives had changed. Their mother sat at the folding kitchen table, poring over a stack of papers. Her face was pale, and her eyes carried the weight of someone battling a storm she couldn't control. Ellie sighed and turned to her siblings. Jake, her 12-year-old brother, was already exploring the flat, his curious nature undeterred by their circumstances. Mia, the youngest at 9, sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing in her sketchbook. The bright colors she used seemed out of place in the dim light of their new home. Ellie stepped toward the window, pulling back the curtain. The view outside was equally uninspiring. An aging tube station sat across the street, its tiled facade faded and cracked. The sign above the entrance read, Tavistock Square Station, in peeling letters. "It's so loud," Mia said, breaking the silence. "I can hear the trains rumbling underneath us." Jake grinned. "That's the best part. We're practically living on top of the tube. Think of all the places we can explore." Ellie shook her head. "It's not an adventure, Jake. It's just where we are now." Their mother's voice interrupted. "Ellie, can you help me unpack the kitchen? We need to make this place livable." Her tone was calm but tired, as if she had used up all her energy just holding herself together. "Sure, Mum," Ellie replied. She glanced at Jake. "No wandering off, okay?" Jake raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, but this place has to have some secrets. Old stations always do." Ellie didn't respond. Instead, she busied herself unpacking plates and glasses, her thoughts drifting. Tavistock Square Station. It was an unassuming name for a place that felt oddly significant. That evening, the family gathered for a simple dinner around the folding table. Their mother tried to smile as she served soup from a pot, but her hands trembled. The weight of their father's absence hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. After dinner, Ellie cleaned up while Jake and Mia begged to explore the station across the street. "Please, Ellie," Jake pleaded. "We'll just look around. We won't go far." Ellie hesitated. She wanted to say no, to keep them safe, but she could see the excitement in their eyes. "Fine," she said at last, "but stay where I can see you." Jake grabbed Mia's hand, and the two dashed out the door, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Ellie followed more slowly, her arms crossed against the chilly evening air. Tavistock Square Station was quiet, its entrance illuminated by a flickering street lamp. A middle-aged man in a blue uniform stood by the ticket barriers, adjusting his cap. He looked up as the children approached and smiled warmly. "You must be the new neighbors," he said. "I'm Mr. Patel, the station master. Welcome to Tavistock Square." Ellie nodded politely. "Thank you. My brother and sister just wanted to take a look." "Well, you've picked a good spot," Mr. Patel said. "This station's got more history than most. Built in 1907, used as a bomb shelter during the Blitz. People lived down here for months during the war." Jake's eyes lit up. "Really? Are there secret tunnels and stuff?" Mr. Patel chuckled. "Plenty of stories, that's for sure. Maybe I'll tell you some when I'm not on duty." Ellie glanced at Jake, who was already craning his neck to look down the escalator. "Come on," she said. "We'll explore another time." Jake groaned but followed her out, with Mia skipping behind them. As they crossed the street back to the flat, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that Tavistock Square Station wasn't as ordinary as it seemed. That night, as Ellie lay in bed, she stared at the cracked ceiling and listened to the faint rumble of trains beneath them. Something about this place was different. It wasn't just the station or the stories Mr. Patel hinted at. It was something deeper, something she couldn't name. She rolled onto her side, determined to ignore it. They had enough to worry about without chasing shadows. But as sleep took her, she couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay beneath their feet. Chapter 2. The Hidden Past. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the flat, casting long shadows on the walls. Ellie woke to the sound of Jake and Mia arguing in the hallway. "You can't take the torch." Mia's voice was high-pitched with frustration. "Why not? It's mine," Jake retorted. Ellie groaned, pulling herself out of bed. "What's going on now?" Jake turned, holding a small flashlight in his hand. Mia says I can't take this to the station. We're going to explore today. Ellie frowned. I told you not to wander off. We're not wandering, Jake said, his tone defensive. Mr. Patel said there are stories about the station. I want to see if they're true. Before Ellie could respond, their mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. Ellie, can you keep an eye on them? I have a meeting with the solicitor today. Ellie nodded reluctantly. She hated seeing her mother like this, exhausted, barely holding on. Fine, but we're not going far, she said, pointing a stern finger at Jake. An hour later, the three siblings stood in front of Tavistock Square Station. Mr. Patel greeted them with a smile as they approached. Back again, I see. What's the plan today? Jake wants to look for secret tunnels, Ellie said, rolling her eyes. Mr. Patel chuckled. Well, you might be in luck. This station has its fair share of oddities. There's an old maintenance tunnel near the disused platform. It hasn't been used in decades, but it's harmless enough. Jake's face lit up. Can we see it? Only if you promise to be careful, Mr. Patel said. I'll unlock the gate for you. The siblings followed Mr. Patel down the dimly lit escalator to the lower level of the station. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint metallic scent. Mr. Patel stopped at a rusted metal gate near the end of the platform and pulled out a large key. The gate creaked open, revealing a narrow, dark corridor. This leads to the old maintenance areas, he said. Stay close and don't touch anything sharp. Ellie hesitated. Are you sure it's safe? Perfectly, Mr. Patel assured her. Just watch your step. The corridor was lined with peeling tiles and rusted pipes, the floor uneven with age. Jake led the way, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Mia clung to Ellie's arm, her eyes wide with both fear and excitement. They passed an old sign that read "Authorized Personnel Only" and entered a small chamber. Dust-covered equipment lay scattered around, and a faint beam of light filtered through a crack in the ceiling. Jake stopped suddenly. Look at this, he whispered, pointing to a brick wall. Carved into the surface were faint numbers and symbols. Jake squinted, running his fingers over the markings. It's a code or something. Ellie stepped closer, studying the wall. The symbols were strange, almost like hieroglyphs, but the numbers were clear. 1943-06-23. What do you think it means? Mia asked. Probably nothing, Ellie said, though she wasn't convinced. Jake grinned. Or it's a clue. They continued exploring, eventually reaching a dead end where a large, rusted door stood. A faded sign above it read, Tavistock Storage Facility, Restricted Access. Jake pressed his ear to the door. It's sealed shut, he said, disappointed. Ellie pulled him back. We're not supposed to be here. Let's go back before Mr. Patel worries. Reluctantly, Jake followed her. But as they walked away, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that the door hid something important. The carved numbers, the restricted sign, it all seemed too deliberate. Back at the flat, the siblings sat around the kitchen table. Jake was scribbling the numbers and symbols from the wall in his notebook, his mind racing. I bet it's a date, he said. June 23rd, 1943. What happened back then? Probably nothing, Ellie said, though her curiosity was growing. Mia chimed in. Maybe it's something from the war. Mr. Patel said this place was a bomb shelter. Ellie nodded slowly. If it is, we'd need to look it up somewhere. The library, maybe. Jake smirked. Or we could go back tomorrow and figure it out ourselves. Ellie glared at him. No way. Not without more information. That night, Ellie found herself unable to sleep. The numbers and the sealed door played over and over in her mind. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint rumble of trains beneath them. Something about Tavistock Square Station wasn't right, and she was beginning to think Jake might be onto something after all. Chapter 3. Clues from the Past. The next day dawned gray and overcast, the streets of London bustling with morning commuters. Ellie stood at the window of their flat, watching people hurry into Tavistock Square Station. Her mind was still on the rusted door and the numbers Jake had copied down. She turned to find Jake and Mia already plotting their next move. Jake had his notebook open on the kitchen table, the symbols and numbers from the wall drawn neatly across the page. I think it's definitely a date, he said, tapping his pencil against the notebook. June 23rd, 1943. Maybe something important happened at the station during the war. Mia, sitting cross-legged on the floor, added, Mr. Patel said it was a bomb shelter. Maybe it's connected to that? Ellie sighed. We can't just keep guessing. If we want answers, we need to do some research. Jake grinned. Finally, you're on my side. Let's go to the library. The siblings arrived at the local library, its grand old facade a testament to the city's history. Inside, they approached the librarian, a kind woman with silver-framed glasses perched on her nose. "How can I help you today?" she asked. Ellie hesitated, unsure how much to say. "We're looking for information about Tavistock Square Station, specifically during the 1940s. The librarian's eyebrows rose. "Ah, the war years. That station was quite significant back then. I believe we have some archives you might find useful. Follow me." She led them to a small room filled with dusty books and microfilm machines. "Try these," she said, pulling out a few folders labeled WWII, London Underground. The siblings settled around a table, poring over the records. Ellie found an old photograph of the station with families huddled together on the platform, blankets draped over their shoulders. A handwritten caption read, "Tavistock Square Station, shelter during the Blitz, 1941. Mia tugged on Ellie's sleeve. "Look at this," she whispered, holding up a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Secret Wartime Deliveries Linked to Tavistock Station." Jake leaned in, reading aloud. "Reports suggest that classified materials were transported through Tavistock Square Station during the war. The Ministry of War has refused to comment." Ellie frowned. "Classified materials? What kind of deliveries?" Jake flipped the page. "There's more. It says the materials were stored in underground facilities, but no one knows exactly where or what they were." As they sifted through the archives, Ellie stumbled upon a journal entry from a station worker, Sal, dated June 23, 1943, the exact date from the wall. She read aloud, "Another late-night delivery. They tell us not to ask questions, but it's hard not to wonder what's in those crates. The ministry says it's for the war effort, but it feels like something more. They're sealing off the storage area tomorrow. We've been told to forget it exists." Mia's eyes widened. "Sealing off the storage area? That has to be the door we saw." Jake nodded, his excitement growing. "It all makes sense now. The numbers are the date they closed it. Whatever they were hiding is still down there." Ellie closed the journal, her heart pounding. If that's true, then why would they hide it? What were they so afraid of? The siblings returned to the flat that afternoon, their heads full of questions. They gathered around the kitchen table, piecing together what they'd learned. Jake drew a rough map of the station, marking the location of the sealed door. If they stored classified materials there during the war, it might still be there, and if no one's touched it since 1943... Ellie interrupted. "We don't know what's behind that door. It could be dangerous." Jake shrugged. "Or it could be nothing, but we won't know unless we look." Mia spoke up. "What if we tell Mr. Patel? He might know more." Ellie hesitated. "I don't think we should get him involved. If this is something big, it could get him in trouble." Jake crossed his arms. "So what do we do? Just ignore it?" Ellie shook her head. "No, we plan. If we're going back to that door, we need to be ready. No more rushing in blind." That night, Ellie lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The journal entry replayed in her mind. "They're sealing off the storage area tomorrow. We've been told to forget it exists." She couldn't shake the feeling that the station's past wasn't just a forgotten piece of history. It was something much bigger, something that was waiting to be uncovered. And she knew, deep down, that they were the ones who would have to uncover it. Chapter 4. The Vault. The next evening, the siblings stood at the entrance to Tavistock Square Station, the glow of the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. Ellie adjusted the strap of her backpack, packed with torches, gloves, and a notebook for recording anything they found. Jake clutched his flashlight eagerly, while Mia carried a small first aid kit, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "This is it," Jake said, grinning. "Tonight, we find out what's behind that door." Ellie nodded, her stomach twisting with nerves. "We have to be quick and careful. If anyone catches us, we could get into serious trouble." Mr. Patel greeted them at the platform with a curious look. "Back again? You lot are persistent, I'll give you that." Ellie hesitated. She didn't want to involve him, but they couldn't get to the vault without his help. "We need to see the maintenance tunnel again. Please, Mr. Patel, it's important." The station master frowned, but finally nodded. "All right, but just this once. I'll stay near the gate and keep an eye out for anyone coming. Thank you, Ellie said, her relief evident. Into the depths. The siblings made their way through the maintenance tunnel, their torches casting flickering beams of light on the damp walls. The air was thick and musty, and the faint sound of trains echoed in the distance. When they reached the rusted door marked Tavistock Storage Facility, Restricted Access, Jake's excitement was palpable. He ran his hands over the surface, examining the old locking mechanism. It's a combination lock, he said, grinning. This is where the numbers come in. Ellie handed him the notebook where he had written the cipher, 1943-06-23. Jake carefully turned the dials, whispering each number under his breath. The lock clicked, and the siblings exchanged nervous glances. Are we really doing this? Mia asked, clutching Ellie's arm. Ellie took a deep breath. Yes, let's see what's inside. Jake tugged on the handle, and the door creaked open, revealing a dark, cavernous room beyond. Inside the vault, the air inside was stale and heavy, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Ellie swept her torch across the room, revealing stacks of wooden crates, rusted filing cabinets, and shelves lined with dusty jars and tools. It's like stepping into a time capsule, Mia whispered. Jake approached one of the crates, prying it open with a crowbar he'd brought from home. Inside were old metal canisters, each marked with faded labels reading, "Property of the Ministry of War." Ellie's torchlight caught something on the far wall, a large map of London with various tube lines highlighted. Beside it was a desk covered in papers, yellowed with age. She carefully picked up one of the documents. It was a requisition order, dated June 22nd, 1943. Her eyes widened as she read, "Materials transported to Tavistock Square Station for Project Ember. Handle with extreme caution." "Project Ember?" she murmured. "What's that?" Jake joined her, holding a small metal lockbox he'd found on one of the shelves. "Look at this. It has the same logo as the canisters." Ellie examined the box. The logo was faint but familiar, a shield with a lightning bolt running through it. "We need to open it." The discovery, Jake pried open the lockbox, revealing a collection of small vials and a stack of papers. The vials contained a strange, glowing liquid, their labels faded but still legible. Compound 47, volatile. Ellie's stomach dropped. Volatile? That sounds dangerous. Jake flipped through the papers, his face growing pale. "These are chemical formulas and instructions for handling biological agents." Mia stepped back, her voice trembling. "Do you think this is a weapon?" Ellie nodded slowly. "It must be. That's why it was hidden here. They didn't want anyone to know." Suddenly, a noise echoed from the tunnel, a distant clang, like metal striking metal. The siblings froze. "Someone's coming," Ellie whispered. "We have to get out of here." The chase. They scrambled to pack up the papers and vials, shoving everything into Jake's backpack. As they hurried toward the exit, the sound of footsteps grew louder. "Stop right there," a voice barked. A man in a dark coat appeared at the entrance to the vault, his face obscured by shadow. He stepped forward, blocking their path. "Who are you?" Ellie demanded, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. The man smirked. "You shouldn't be here. Hand over the bag and I'll let you leave." Jake tightened his grip on the backpack. "No way." The man took a step closer, his tone turning cold. "Do you know what you found? It's not a game, kids. This is dangerous. Give it to me." Ellie exchanged a glance with Jake. "Run," she said. They bolted past the man, ducking as he lunged for them. Jake nearly tripped, but Ellie grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. Mia clung to her other side, her small feet pounding against the uneven floor. The man shouted after them, but they didn't stop. They reached the gate where Mr. Patel was waiting, alarmed by the noise. "What's going on?" he asked. "No time to explain," Ellie gasped. "Lock the gate." Mr. Patel hesitated but complied, slamming the gate shut just as the man appeared in the tunnel. He glared at them through the bars, his face twisted in anger. "This isn't over," he growled before retreating into the darkness. Safe, but not secure. Back at the flat, the siblings dumped the contents of Jake's backpack onto the kitchen table. The vials glowed faintly in the dim light, and the papers were covered in technical jargon far beyond their understanding. Ellie looked at her siblings, her voice firm. "We need to figure out what this is, and fast. Whatever Project Ember was, it's dangerous, and now they know we're onto it." Jake nodded, his eyes shining with determination. We're not stopping until we know the truth. Mia whispered, What if they come after us? Ellie placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then we'll be ready. As the vials pulsed faintly in the dark, the siblings realized they had uncovered more than just a piece of history. They had stumbled into a secret that could change everything. Chapter 5. The Watcher. The flat was eerily silent the next morning. Ellie sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the papers they'd recovered from the vault. The technical jargon was overwhelming. Chemical formulas, shipping records, and official-looking documents stamped with the Ministry of War's insignia. Jake leaned over her shoulder. Any clues about what this Compound 47 is? Ellie shook her head. Not yet, but whatever it is, it's dangerous. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands. Mia, perched on the edge of the sofa, whispered, What if we already have? Ellie glanced at her little sister, her heart sinking. Mia had barely slept, her fear evident in the way she clutched her sketchbook. Ellie wanted to reassure her, but she wasn't sure how. Jake broke the tension. We need help. Someone who knows about this stuff. Ellie frowned. Who? We can't just tell anyone. What if they're connected to the man from the vault? Jake was about to respond when Ellie's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up to see a text message from an unknown number. You're in over your heads. Meet me at Tavistock Square Station at 8 p.m. Come alone. Ellie stared at the message, her pulse quickening. It's him, the man from the vault. The decision. The siblings argued for what felt like hours. Ellie wanted to go to the meeting to learn more, but Jake insisted it was too dangerous. You can't just walk into a trap, he said, pacing the kitchen. And what's your plan? Ellie shot back. Sit here and wait for them to find us? Mia spoke up timidly. What if he's trying to help? He didn't hurt us last night. Jake scoffed. Not yet. Ellie stood, her jaw set. I'm going. We need answers, and this is the only lead we have. Jake sighed. Fine, but you're not going alone. The meeting. At exactly 8 p.m., Ellie stood outside Tavistock Square Station. The streets were quieter than usual, the distant hum of traffic the only sound. She glanced over her shoulder, knowing Jake and Mia were watching from a nearby alley. She had reluctantly agreed to let them come, but only if they stayed hidden. The station was dark, the lights inside dimmed for the night. Ellie hesitated at the entrance, her palms sweaty. A figure stepped out of the shadows, and she recognized him immediately, the man from the vault. He wasn't wearing his trench coat this time, just a plain gray jacket and a weary expression. You came, he said, his voice low. Ellie crossed her arms. What do you want? The man sighed. To warn you. You don't understand what you've stumbled into. Then explain it, Ellie snapped. What is Project Ember? What's in those vials? He hesitated, glancing around as if expecting to be watched. Project Ember was a wartime experiment. The government wanted a deterrent, something more dangerous than bombs, something that could end the war quickly. Ellie's stomach twisted. And Compound 47. The man's expression darkened. A chemical agent. Unstable, unpredictable. It was never meant to be used. But Vanguard... He broke off, his jaw tightening. Vanguard? Ellie prompted. They've been profiting from Ember's legacy for decades, he said. Your parent found evidence of their corruption. That's why they were framed. Ellie's chest tightened. You're saying this is all connected? The vault, the vials, my dad's imprisonment? The man nodded. And now you're in the middle of it. Vanguard won't stop until they get those vials back. An interruption before Ellie could respond. A car screeched to a stop at the curb. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, their eyes scanning the area. Run, the man hissed, shoving Ellie toward the station. She stumbled but regained her footing, sprinting toward the alley where Jake and Mia were waiting. Go, she shouted, grabbing their hands and pulling them into the shadows. The man stayed behind, confronting the suited men. Ellie glanced back just in time to see him raise his hands, surrendering as they grabbed him and forced him into the car. Who were they? Mia whispered, her voice trembling. Vanguard, Ellie said, her mind racing. They must have been watching us. Regrouping. Back at the flat, the siblings sat in tense silence. Ellie replayed the man's words in her head. Vanguard won't stop until they get those vials back. Jake broke the silence. We can't stay here. If Vanguard knows where we are, Ellie interrupted. We won't let them scare us. We need to figure out our next move. Mia looked up, her voice small. What if they come after us? Ellie placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we fight back. We have the truth on our side. Jake nodded. We need to expose them. Get these files and the vials to someone who can do something about it. Ellie's mind was already working. Clara Henshaw, the journalist their dad had mentioned once, came to mind. She was known for taking down corrupt corporations. Then that's what we'll do, Ellie said, her voice firm. We'll take this to Clara Henshaw, and we'll bring Vanguard down. Chapter 6. Planning the exposure. The siblings huddled around the kitchen table, the atmosphere tense but determined. The vials and documents they'd uncovered sat between them, their faint glow casting eerie shadows on the walls. Ellie tapped her pen against her notebook, jotting down ideas. We can't just walk into a newspaper office with this stuff, she said. We need a plan. Jake leaned forward, his arms crossed. We've got the files, the vials, and proof that Vanguard's involved in something shady. What else do we need? Credibility, Ellie replied. If we just hand this over without context, they might dismiss it as a hoax, or worse, hand it back to Vanguard. Mia, who had been quietly drawing in her sketchbook, spoke up. What about that journalist Dad used to talk about? Clara Henshaw. He said she was fearless. Ellie's eyes lit up. You're right. If anyone can help us, it's her. But we'll need to contact her without tipping off Vanguard. Jake smirked. Leave that to me. I can find her email address and send an encrypted message. Ellie nodded. Do it, and tell her to meet us somewhere public. We can't take any risks. Reaching out. Jake spent the next hour hunched over his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. He bypassed firewalls and combed through public records until he found Clara Henshaw's contact information. Got it, he said triumphantly. I'll send her the basics, just enough to get her attention. Ellie leaned over his shoulder as he typed. Subject, urgent evidence, Project Ember. We have information about a classified WWII operation and its modern implications. It involves Vanguard logistics and dangerous materials hidden in London. We need to meet. Lives are at risk. Jake hit send and leaned back, exhaling deeply. Now we wait, the reply. The response came quicker than they expected. Less than an hour later, Ellie's phone buzzed with an email notification. She opened it, her heart racing. From Clara Henshaw, subject, Project Ember. I'm listening. Meet me tomorrow at noon in the cafe near St. James's Park. Come alone. Jake whistled. She doesn't waste time, does she? Ellie frowned. Why alone? Doesn't she know how dangerous this is? She's probably being cautious, Jake said, but we're not letting you go alone. Ellie nodded. We'll stick together. We just need to be smart about it. The cafe meeting. The next day, the siblings arrived early at the cafe. It was a cozy, bustling spot near St. James's Park, with large windows overlooking the street. Ellie scanned the room nervously, searching for Clara. There she is, Jake whispered, nodding toward a corner table. Clara Henshaw was a striking figure, her sharp features framed by dark hair tied back in a ponytail. She was typing on a laptop, her piercing gaze flicking up as the siblings approached. You must be Ellie, Clara said, standing to shake her hand. Her voice was calm but commanding. Ellie nodded. These are my siblings, Jake and Mia. Thank you for meeting us. Clara gestured for them to sit. You've got my attention. What's this about Project Ember? Ellie pulled out the USB drive and a folder of documents. During WWII, the government ran a classified operation called Project Ember. They used the tube network to store and transport dangerous materials, chemical agents, prototypes, things they didn't want the public to know about. Clara's brow furrowed as she flipped through the papers. And you think these materials still exist? Ellie nodded. We found them in a sealed vault under Tavistock Square Station. Vanguard Logistics is connected. They've been profiting from this for decades. Our dad found out and was framed to cover it up. Clara's eyes narrowed. Do you have proof? Jake pulled out the vials. These were in the vault. They're labeled as Compound 47, and the documents describe them as unstable chemical agents. Clara studied the glowing liquid, her expression unreadable. This is big. If it's true, it could bring down Vanguard and a lot of powerful people. But exposing this won't be easy. Vanguard won't go down without a fight. The danger arrives. Before they could discuss further, Ellie noticed a black car pull up outside the cafe. Two men in suits stepped out, their eyes scanning the windows. Vanguard, Ellie whispered, her heart pounding. Clara closed the folder calmly. Follow my lead, she said, standing and slinging her laptop bag over her shoulder. The siblings followed her through the back door of the cafe, their footsteps quick but quiet. Clara led them into a narrow alley, glancing over her shoulder. They're after the evidence, she said. Do you have backups? Jake nodded. Multiple. But if they get the vials, they won't, Clara interrupted. We're getting out of here. A narrow escape. The group navigated through the maze of alleyways, ducking into side streets and blending into crowds. Clara's calm demeanor was both reassuring and unnerving. Finally, they reached a small, nondescript office building. Clara ushered them inside and locked the door. This is a safe house, she explained. You'll stay here while I figure out how to release this story. Ellie hesitated. What happens if Vanguard finds us? Clara's expression softened. They won't. Not here. But you need to be ready. Once this story breaks, they'll come after anyone connected to it. Preparing for the fight. As the siblings settled into the safe house, Clara worked tirelessly to verify the evidence and prepare her exposé. The tension in the air was palpable, but Ellie felt a glimmer of hope. They had come so far, uncovering the truth, finding an ally, and holding their ground against Vanguard. Now, all they had to do was see it through. We're not backing down, Ellie said to Jake and Mia. No matter what happens. Jake grinned. You think we would? This is just getting interesting. Mia smiled faintly, her hand tightening around her sketchbook. We'll get Dad back, and we'll make sure they can't hurt anyone else. As the night deepened, the siblings prepared for what was to come, knowing the next move would change their lives forever. Chapter 7. The Exposé. The early morning light streamed through the dusty windows of the safe house. Ellie stood in the corner of the room, watching Clara pace back and forth, a phone pressed to her ear. Jake and Mia sat at the table, going through the documents one more time to ensure nothing was missing. Clara hung up the phone and turned to them, her expression serious. It's done. The story goes live at noon. I've sent everything to my editor. Once it's published, it'll be impossible for Vanguard to bury it. Ellie felt a rush of relief, but also a gnawing sense of unease. What happens next? Clara crossed her arms. Vanguard won't take this lightly. They'll fight back, legally and otherwise. But the evidence is solid. With public pressure, they'll be forced to answer for Project Ember and what they've done. Mia, her voice small, asked, What about us? Will they come after us? Clara's expression softened. You're safer now than you were before. The more public this becomes, the harder it will be for Vanguard to act without scrutiny. But you'll need to be careful. The waiting game. The hours leading up to the publication dragged on, each tick of death, the clock amplifying the tension in the room. Jake tried to lighten the mood by sharing stories about obscure tube trivia he'd looked up, but his jokes fell flat. Even Mia, usually quick to giggle, seemed too nervous to respond. At exactly noon, Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and nodded. It's live. Ellie hurried over as Clara pulled up the article. The headline blazed across the screen. Secret WWII operation exposed, Vanguard Logistics and Project Ember's dangerous legacy. The article detailed everything. Compound 47, the vault under Tavistock Square Station, and Vanguard's decades-long cover-up. Photos of the vials, documents, and the rusted vault door accompanied the text, painting a damning picture of the corporation's actions. Jake leaned over her shoulder, grinning. We did it. The fallout begins. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story, and social media exploded with outrage. Calls for investigations into Vanguard Logistics and its connections to the Ministry of Defense flooded government offices, but the siblings barely had time to celebrate. By mid-afternoon, a news report flashed across the small television in the safe house. Breaking news. Vanguard denies allegations, blames rogue whistleblowers for conspiracy. Ellie groaned. Of course they're denying it. Clara wasn't surprised. They'll deny it until they can't. The evidence is too strong. It's only a matter of time. A new threat. As the evening wore on, the tension in the safe house grew. Clara's phone rang constantly, journalists and officials seeking more information. Jake monitored the internet for updates, while Mia sketched quietly in the corner. Just as the sun began to set, there was a knock at the door. Everyone froze. Clara motioned for the siblings to stay back as she approached the door cautiously. Peering through the peephole, her expression darkened. She opened the door just a crack. The watcher stood on the other side. "What are you doing here?" Clara demanded. He raised his hands, his expression calm. "I'm here to help." Ellie stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Why should we trust you?" The watcher looked at her, his voice steady. "Because Vanguard won't stop with denials. They'll come for you, and they'll destroy anything or anyone that gets in their way. I can help you stay ahead of them." Clara hesitated, studying him. "Why would you turn on them now?" He sighed. "I didn't sign up for this. I thought I was protecting something important, something for the greater good. But I see now it was all about profit and power. You want to bring them down? So do I." A plan to end it. The Watcher explained that Vanguard had hidden other remnants of Project Ember in locations across the city, each one potentially as dangerous as the vault under Tavistock Square Station. "If you want to stop them for good," he said, "you'll need more than the story. You'll need to uncover everything." Ellie exchanged a glance with Clara. "How?" "We don't have the resources to take on a corporation like Vanguard." The Watcher pulled out a small notebook. "These are the locations of the other sites. If you can get to them before Vanguard does, you'll have all the evidence you need." Jake grinned. "A scavenger hunt across London? Sounds fun." Ellie frowned. "It's not a game, Jake. This is dangerous." Mia, clutching her sketchbook, spoke up. "But it's the right thing to do, isn't it? If we don't stop them, who will?" Ellie took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "We'll do it, but only if we're smart about it." Preparing for the hunt, Clara agreed to stay behind and continue pushing the media coverage while the siblings, guided by the Watcher, prepared for their next move. The locations in the notebook were scattered across the city, each one tied to Vanguard's dark history. As they packed their bags and reviewed their plan, Ellie felt a surge of determination. They had come this far, uncovering the truth, exposing the lies, and standing up to a powerful corporation. Now, they were on the brink of something even bigger. "Let's finish this," she said, looking at Jake and Mia. "Together." Jake grinned. "You couldn't stop me if you tried." Mia smiled, her eyes shining with quiet bravery. "Me neither." As the siblings prepared to leave, the faint rumble of a passing tube train echoed through the room, a reminder of where their journey had begun and how far they had come. Chapter 8: The First Clue. The morning broke with a dull gray sky, the streets of London bustling with early commuters. Ellie, Jake, Mia, and the Watcher huddled in a corner booth of a small cafe near Camden Town, reviewing the notebook he had handed them the night before. The Watcher leaned forward, pointing to a map he had sketched out. "The first site is here, an old maintenance hub near the Northern Line. It's been sealed for decades, but Vanguard used it during the war to store sensitive materials. It's likely still intact." Ellie studied the map. "What are we looking for exactly?" The Watcher tapped the page. "Anything that ties Vanguard to Project Ember, documents, equipment, anything they missed when they abandoned the site. We need more evidence to keep the pressure on them." Mia, chewing on a piece of toast, asked, "Is it dangerous?" The Watcher hesitated. "It might be. Vanguard knows about these locations, and they won't hesitate to destroy anything or anyone that gets in their way." Ellie's stomach churned, but she nodded. "Then we have to be careful." The maintenance hub. The entrance to the maintenance hub was hidden behind a graffiti-covered wall in a quiet alley near Camden Town Station. The Watcher pried open a rusted metal gate, revealing a narrow staircase that led underground. Jake grinned as he adjusted his flashlight. "It's like something out of a spy movie." "Let's hope it's not as dramatic," Ellie muttered, leading the way. The air grew colder as they descended, the faint hum of passing trains vibrating through the walls. The staircase opened into a large chamber, its walls lined with old lockers and tool racks. Rusted equipment lay scattered across the floor, and the air smelled of damp metal. "This place is huge," Mia whispered, clutching Ellie's hand. The Watcher gestured toward a set of heavy metal doors at the far end of the chamber. "The storage area should be through there." A hidden cache. The doors groaned as the Watcher pushed them open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Crates were stacked against the walls, their wooden exteriors worn and splintered with age. A large metal cabinet stood in the center, its door slightly ajar. Ellie approached the cabinet cautiously, her torch illuminating its contents. Inside, she found folders stuffed with yellowed papers, each stamped with the Ministry of War's insignia. "Jackpot," Jake said, peering over her shoulder. Ellie flipped through the documents. They detailed shipments of Compound 47 to various sites across London, each marked as Top Secret Project Ember. "This proves they distributed it," Ellie said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "If we can show how widespread this was, it'll be impossible for Vanguard to deny." Jake opened one of the crates, revealing rows of glass vials similar to the ones they had found in the Tavistock Square vault. The faint glow of the liquid inside sent a chill down Ellie's spine. "We need to document everything," Ellie said, pulling out her phone to take photos. An unexpected encounter. As they worked, a faint sound echoed through the chamber. Footsteps. Ellie froze, holding her breath. "Someone's here," the watcher whispered, motioning for them to stay quiet. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the murmur of voices. Ellie crouched behind a crate, clutching Mia's hand, as two men in dark suits entered the room. Their faces were stern, their movements methodical as they scanned the area. "Vanguard," the watcher mouthed silently. The men began inspecting the crates, oblivious to the group hiding in the shadows. Ellie's mind raced. They couldn't leave without the evidence, but they couldn't risk being caught either. Jake, ever the risk-taker, motioned toward a small side door. Ellie hesitated but nodded. One by one, they slipped through the door, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust on the floor. The escape. The side door led to a narrow tunnel, its walls damp and crumbling. The group moved quickly, the faint light of their torches guiding the way. Mia's voice trembled. "What if they find us?" "They won't," Ellie said, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. The tunnel twisted and turned, eventually opening into an old service corridor that connected to the Northern Line. The sound of a passing train rumbled through the walls, masking their hurried footsteps. Finally, they emerged onto a quiet platform, blending seamlessly with the few late-morning commuters. Ellie exhaled deeply, her heart still pounding. "We got what we needed," the watcher said, his voice low. "But this was too close. Vanguard's clearly watching these sites," Ellie nodded. "Then we need to move faster. If they're trying to destroy the evidence, we have to get to the other sites before they do." Back at the safe house. The siblings and the watcher returned to the safe house, their nerves still frayed from the encounter. Clara was waiting for them, her laptop open on the table. "What did you find?" she asked, her tone urgent. Ellie placed the documents on the table, spreading them out for Clara to see. Proof that Vanguard transported Compound 47 to multiple locations, and more of the vials. Clara's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. "This is incredible. If we can verify these documents, it'll blow the story wide open." The watcher stepped forward. "There are more sites, but Vanguard's already onto us. We'll need to act quickly." Clara nodded. "I'll start working on the next article. You focus on finding the rest of the evidence." Determined to finish that night, as the siblings prepared for the next leg of their journey, Ellie felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were getting closer to the truth, but the stakes were higher than ever. Sitting on the edge of her bed, she glanced at Jake and Mia. "We're in this together, no matter what." Jake grinned. "You think I'd back out now? This is just getting good." Mia smiled faintly, her eyes tired but resolute. "We'll finish what we started." Ellie nodded, her determination unwavering. The journey wasn't over, but they were ready for whatever came next. Chapter 9. Racing Against Time. The next morning, the safe house buzzed with quiet urgency. Clara's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard as she worked to corroborate the evidence from the maintenance hub. Ellie, Jake, Mia, and the watcher pored over the notebook, their nerves taut. The watcher traced his finger over a page of coordinates. "This one," he said, tapping the map. "A decommissioned station near the WWII line. It's another old storage facility, but it's been disguised as part of the ventilation system. Vanguard might think it's too obscure to bother with, at least for now." Ellie nodded. "Then that's where we go next." The journey to the WWII site. The siblings slipped out of the safe house in the early afternoon, their backpacks carefully packed with supplies. The watcher led the way through back streets and quiet alleys, avoiding main roads where Vanguard agents might be searching. Mia clutched Ellie's hand as they approached the abandoned station entrance. A rusted gate, chained shut, marked the site. Jake examined the lock, pulling out a small set of tools. "Simple padlock," he said with a smirk. "Give me 30 seconds." Ellie rolled her eyes. "Just hurry up." True to his word, Jake popped the lock and the gate creaked open. They slipped inside, the noise swallowed by the surrounding city's hum. The hidden facility. The station was dark and oppressive, its tiled walls coated with grime. Their footsteps echoed as they descended into the disused tunnels, the faint smell of damp earth growing stronger. The watcher carried a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. Jake stopped suddenly, pointing at a door marked "Ventilation Access, Authorized Personnel Only." "This is it," he whispered. The watcher nodded. "Be ready for anything." They pushed the door open to reveal a narrow corridor lined with pipes and cables. At the end of the hallway stood a heavy steel door, its surface scratched and dented with age. Ellie felt a chill as she noticed the faint outline of a Ministry of War emblem etched into the metal. "This is definitely a storage site," the watcher said. "Let's see if Vanguard left anything behind." Inside the vault, the door groaned as they pushed it open, revealing a room eerily similar to the Tavistock Square vault. Wooden crates were stacked haphazardly, many of them splintered or overturned. A filing cabinet sat in the corner, its drawers slightly ajar. Ellie and Jake immediately began searching through the crates. Mia stayed close to the watcher, her small hands clutching her torch. "Look at this," Jake said, pulling a sealed envelope from one of the crates. He handed it to Ellie, who carefully opened it. Inside was a typed memo dated 1944, stamped "Top Secret." "All Compound 47 related materials must be transported to secondary sites immediately. Any remaining evidence is to be destroyed. Final clearance required from Vanguard Logistics HQ." Ellie's breath caught. They were trying to wipe everything out, even back then. Jake found another crate, this one sealed with a Vanguard Logistics emblem. He pried it open to reveal more vials, similar to the ones they had found at Tavistock. These glowed faintly in the dim light, their labels faded but still legible. "We need to document all of this," Ellie said, pulling out her phone to take photos. A sudden danger. As they worked, the watcher stiffened. "Quiet," he whispered. Ellie froze, listening intently. Faint footsteps echoed down the corridor, accompanied by the murmur of voices. "They're here," the watcher said grimly. "Vanguard." Jake's eyes widened. "What do we do?" The watcher scanned the room, his expression calculating. "We need to get out of here, but not without the evidence." Ellie's mind raced. They couldn't afford to leave empty-handed. "Jake, pack as much as you can into the bag. Mia, stay close to me." The voices grew louder. Ellie glanced toward the door, her heart pounding. There was no time to argue. The escape with Jake's backpack stuffed full of documents and vials. The group slipped out through a side door the watcher had spotted earlier. The narrow passageway led to a maintenance tunnel, its uneven floor forcing them to move carefully. Behind them, the sound of Vanguard agents rummaging through the vault grew louder. Ellie quickened her pace, her grip on Mia's hand tightening. "Keep going," the watcher urged. "We're almost there." The tunnel opened onto a service corridor connected to the Jubilee line. The faint hum of passing trains filled the air, masking their hurried footsteps. As they reached the platform, Ellie glanced back, half expecting to see Vanguard agents closing in, but the tunnel behind them remained dark and silent. Back at the safe house, by the time they returned to the safe house, they were exhausted but triumphant. Clara was waiting, her eyes widening as Jake spilled the contents of his bag onto the table. "You found more?" she asked, incredulous. Ellie nodded. "More vials, more documents, and proof that Vanguard tried to destroy everything." Clara began sorting through the papers, her expression growing graver with each passing moment. "This is damning. If we can release this, there's no way they can deny it." The watcher stepped forward. "There's still one more site. It's the most secure and the most dangerous." Ellie met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. "Then that's where we go next." Preparing for the final push. As night fell, the siblings sat together, reviewing their plan for the next day. The final site was buried deep beneath an operational station, its location carefully hidden. "This is it," Ellie said. "One last site. If we can get the evidence there, we'll have everything we need to bring Vanguard down for good." Jake grinned. "You mean one more adventure?" Mia smiled faintly. And then we can go home? Ellie nodded, her heart swelling with determination. Yes, then we can go home. As the city hummed outside, the siblings prepared for the final chapter of their journey, knowing it would be their most dangerous mission yet. Chapter 10: The Final Sight. The air in the safe house was heavy with anticipation. Ellie, Jake, Mia, Clara, and the Watcher sat around the table, the notebook with the coordinates of the final site lying open in front of them. The Watcher traced the map with his finger, stopping at a point near Westminster Station. "This is the most secure site," he said. "It's deep beneath the station, originally designed as an emergency war room during the Blitz. Vanguard converted it into a storage facility after the war." Clara frowned. "And it's operational?" The Watcher nodded. "Barely. It's part of the station's infrastructure now, but the entrance is disguised. We'll have to be careful. Security will be tight." Ellie glanced at Jake and Mia. "Are you too sure about this? It's going to be dangerous." Jake smirked. "When isn't it?" Mia, clutching her sketchbook, gave a small but determined nod. "We're in this together." Clara reached out, placing a hand on Ellie's shoulder. "Once you get the evidence, send it to me immediately. I'll make sure it goes public." Ellie took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. "Let's finish this." The descent. The siblings and the Watcher arrived at Westminster Station under the guise of tourists. The bustling crowds provided the perfect cover as they made their way to a hidden service door tucked behind a maintenance area. The Watcher produced a keycard he had acquired during his time with Vanguard and swiped it against the reader. The door clicked open. "Stay close," he whispered as they entered the narrow passageway. The air grew colder as they descended deeper into the station's hidden levels. The sound of the tube faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. Ellie's flashlight flickered against the walls, illuminating rusted pipes and faded signs warning of restricted access. At last, they reached a steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only, No Admittance." "This is it," the Watcher said. "Beyond this door is the core of Vanguard's operations." The final vault. The door creaked open to reveal a massive underground chamber. Rows of shelves lined the walls, filled with crates, files, and equipment covered in dust. The air was thick with the smell of oil and decay. Jake let out a low whistle. "This is a lot." Ellie moved to the nearest shelf, her torchlight catching the faded Vanguard logo on the crates. She opened one, finding more vials of Compound 47, their glow faint but ominous. Nearby, Mia discovered a stack of ledgers detailing shipments and payments. "This is everything we need," Ellie said, her voice steady. "It's the entire history of Project Ember." The Watcher scanned the room. "Take what you can, but be quick. Vanguard will notice the breach soon." A ticking clock. As they worked, Ellie found a locked cabinet in the corner of the room. She pried it open with a crowbar, revealing a stack of documents stamped "Eyes Only, Top Secret." She flipped through the papers, her heart racing. "These are blueprints for facilities all over London. They've been hiding this for decades." Jake called out from another shelf. "I found something too, old photographs. Look at this." He held up a faded black and white photo of men in military uniforms standing beside crates marked Compound 47. Ellie's stomach churned. This proves the government was complicit. The confrontation. Just as they were packing up the evidence, an alarm blared, its shrill tone echoing through the chamber. The Watcher cursed under his breath. "They know we're here." Moments later, footsteps thundered down the corridor. Ellie's chest tightened as Vanguard agents poured into the room, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Freeze," one of them shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. The siblings backed against the wall, clutching their bags of evidence. The Watcher stepped forward, his hands raised. "You don't want to do this," he said evenly. "You're too late. The truth is already out." The lead agent smirked. "We'll see about that." Ellie's mind raced. They couldn't let Vanguard take the evidence, or them. "Jake," she whispered, "you have the files backed up, right?" Jake nodded. "On multiple drives." Ellie glanced at the Watcher. "Cover us." The Watcher nodded subtly, then lunged at the nearest agent, knocking his flashlight to the ground. Chaos erupted as Ellie, Jake, and Mia darted for the exit, dodging the agents in the confusion. The chase. The siblings sprinted down the corridor, the sound of shouting and pounding footsteps behind them. Ellie's lungs burned, but she pushed forward, gripping Mia's hand tightly. "This way," the watcher called, leading them through a series of twisting tunnels. The air grew thicker, the faint hum of the tube returning as they neared the surface. Finally, they burst through a maintenance door, emerging into the bustling chaos of Westminster Station. The agent stopped short, unwilling to cause a scene in the crowded public space. "We did it," Jake panted, his face flushed with adrenaline. Ellie nodded, clutching her bag. "Let's get back to Clara." The final exposure. Back at the safe house, Clara worked quickly to compile the evidence. The documents, photographs, and ledgers painted an undeniable picture of corruption, greed, and danger. "This is the nail in the coffin," Clara said, her voice fierce. "Vanguard won't be able to recover from this." She pressed send, distributing the files to major news outlets and trusted allies. Within hours, the story dominated headlines. Vanguard logistics exposed, decades of secrecy and corruption revealed. The aftermath. The fallout was swift. Vanguard's executives were arrested, their assets frozen as investigations began. Government officials faced scrutiny for their involvement in Project Ember, and the vials of Compound 47 were seized and destroyed under strict oversight. Ellie, Jake, and Mia returned home with their mother, finally able to breathe freely. Their father's name was cleared, and he was released from prison, his embrace erasing months of fear and uncertainty. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us." Ellie smiled. "We didn't do it alone." Epilogue. Weeks later, the siblings stood outside Tavistock Square Station, watching the trains come and go. The station had become a symbol of resilience, its forgotten history now part of London's legacy. Ellie turned to Jake and Mia. "Think there are more mysteries out there?" Jake grinned. "Definitely, and I'm ready for the next one." Mia nodded, her sketchbook clutched tightly. "Me too." As a train roared into the station, the siblings shared a smile, knowing they had faced danger, uncovered the truth, and emerged stronger than ever. Their journey wasn't over, but they were ready for whatever came next.